Senator Tom Harkin was first elected to Congress from Iowa's 5th Congressional District in 1974 and served 10 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was then elected to the Senate, and in 2008 he made history by becoming the first Iowa Democrat to win a 5th term in the U.S. Senate. Today, Senator Harkin is a leader representing Iowa, his party, and his country. He is the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee and chairman of the Appropriations Committee for Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education. Among his many accomplishments, Senator Harkin's signature legislative achievement is the Americans with Disabilities Act, something that he relates to on a very personal level.
Well, I first became an advocate for people with disabilities because of my brother Frank. I remember my brother telling me one time, I may be deaf, but I'm not dumb. There were things he wanted to do, and so he kept breaking barriers all the time, but it was always a struggle. I got the idea from growing up with my brother that people with disabilities have a lot of potentials, but they're not being given the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Early in his career, Senator Ted Kennedy tapped Senator Harkin to craft legislation to protect the civil rights of millions of Americans with physical and intellectual disabilities.
Well, you know, before we had disability rights laws, America, for people with disabilities, was a tough place. If you were a person with a disability, you were so limited. And what happened is so many times families with a person with a disability were separated. They could not take the person with a disability to a theater, sometimes not even to a restaurant. People were just closeted. They were kept under wraps all their lives and not being allowed to develop themselves. There was gross discrimination in our country against people with disabilities. And that's why I fought so hard for the Americans with Disabilities Act, because it's a civil rights bill. The whole history of how we've treated people with disabilities is a shameful episode in human history.
Senator Harkin's success in ending institutionalized discrimination against people with disabilities was due to diligent, thoughtful, and bipartisan collaboration.
The first person to actually introduce a comprehensive civil rights bill for the disabled was Senator Lowell Weicker, a Republican, who has a son with Down syndrome. A lot of people were involved. I mentioned Lowell Weicker, Senator Ted Kennedy, Senator Bob Dole, the first President Bush, who really committed himself to getting this done. Boyd and Gray, Tony Coelho in the House, and Steny Hoyer in the House, and Justin Dart. So many people were involved in this wonderful effort.
Recently, Senator Harkin has helped the Global Down Syndrome Foundation shine a light on the lack of research and medical care funding for people with Down syndrome and has urged investment in this important research area.
NIH funding for research into various aspects of disabilities, especially developmental disabilities, is so important because while the pharmaceutical companies do invest in research, mostly they're interested in a drug that will tend to make a lot of money. That's why NIH funding is so important. There's a whole lot of things that NIH does that may not make a company a lot of money, but is very important to people with disabilities and also their families. I can't say enough good things about the Global Down Syndrome Foundation. They do amazing work. They have a good focus on what they do, and they have brought, I think, to all of us a realization that people with Down syndrome have potential. I think what the Global Down Syndrome Foundation is pointing out is that we all need to focus on making sure that kids with Down syndrome are challenged to their utmost and that they reach their full potential.
Senator Harkin's work contributed to the closure of the inhumane institutions where people with Down syndrome and other developmental disabilities were kept. Today, he continues to have high hopes for the future of people with Down syndrome, including tonight's ambassador.
What I hope for people with Down syndrome is that each person be able to live a full life, a rewarding life, to be challenged to do his or her best, to be able to be fully integrated in society, to have employment, that they be allowed to progress, and that each person with Down syndrome has a unique personal life that is rewarding. I got to tell you, I really want to meet this Alex Sessions. I've read about him. And all that he's done, here he is, Eagle Scout. He won all these medals in the Special Olympics. He's accomplished so much, and he's only 17 years old. I think Alex Sessions is a shining example of what happens when you focus on people's abilities and not their disabilities.
for protecting the human and civil rights for people with disabilities in the U.S., including people with Down syndrome. The Global Down Syndrome Foundation is proud to present Senator Tom Harkin with the Quincy Jones Exceptional Advocacy Award.